Good afternoon, second through fourth grade. I would like to continue this week with a new book, and we're going to keep working with theme and text to self connections while also asking ourselves questions while we're reading so that we can work on our comprehension. So, the new book I'd like to introduce to you is titled The Old Woman Who Named Things, and our author up here, the person who writes the story, is Cynthia Rylant, and our illustrator, our artist, is Catherine Brown. Okay, so I'm going to treat this book just like normal. I will read to you, and then this part is a little bit different. When I do make stops, I want you guys to be able to write things down on some paper to give you some extra writing practice and just keep track of your thoughts. So would you please get out your sheet of paper that is titled The Old Woman Who Named Things, and we're going to do part 1 on here. I'll give you some time to do that. Go ahead. All right, let's begin. Once there was an old woman who loved to name things. She named the old car she drove Betsy. She named the old chair she sat in Fred. She named the old bed she slept on Roxanne. And she named her old house Franklin. Every morning she would get out of Roxanne, have a cup of cocoa in Fred, lock up Franklin, and drive to the post office in Betsy. She always hoped for a letter from someone, but all she ever got was bills. The reason the old woman never got any letters was because she had outlived every single one of her friends. I'm going to pause here because I want to tell you what outlived means. It means that she lived longer than the rest of her friends, so they've all passed away and moved on. This worried her. She didn't like the idea of being a lonely old woman without any friends, without anyone whom she could call by name. So she began to name things. But she named only those things she knew she could never outlive. So she's only going to name things that will live longer than she will, or that will stay in better condition. Her car, Betsy, had more get up and go than anything around. Her chair, Fred, had never sagged a day in his life. Not one creak or moan had she ever heard out of her old bed, Roxanne. And her house, Franklin, had been standing straight for over 100 years and still didn't look a day past 20. The old woman never worried about outliving any of them, and her days were happy. Okay, we're going to make our first pause right here because I want to do a little recap, and that just means to check our comprehension and check that we know what we're reading about. So, on your page for The Old Woman Who Outlived Things, you'll notice that I've got some names on there for you of the woman's items in her home or outside her home. Okay? Would you please remind us what name belongs to each item? Okay? So, Fred is the, Betsy is the, and then also Roxanne and Franklin. So, what objects or items have those names? Go ahead and pause your video here. Then one day, when the old woman was out soaping some mud off Betsy, telling her that Franklin wouldn't want to be seen with a car that didn't keep its bumpers a little cleaner, a shy brown puppy came to the old woman's gate. The old woman had not named the gate because 2 of its hinges, the part that makes it swing open and close, had rusted off, and she could tell that the gate wasn't long for this world. The shy brown puppy wagged its tail. It looked a little hungry. The old woman stood beside Betsy and watched the puppy for a while. She said. Okay, I'm going to stop right here because I would like to do a text-to-self connection. So something that I just read about reminds me of my life. And I'm reminded of something in my life by this small brown puppy right here because I have a brown dog who was once a small brown puppy. His name is Moose, and he is named that because he's a chocolate lab, and he is very large. He is no longer a small brown puppy. He is the size of a big brown moose. Then she walked into Franklin, got a chunk of ham from her refrigerator, and came back outside. The old woman gave the ham to the hungry puppy and told it to go home. She told it that Betsy always made puppies sick, and Fred never allowed puppies to sit on him, and Roxanne wasn't wide enough for a puppy and an old woman to fit on, and besides all this, Franklin couldn't tolerate dog hair. So the puppy went away. Did you get all those names? But the next day, the puppy was back. The old woman was sitting in Fred reading a book on everlasting flowers when she saw the puppy through her window. Here's Fred. Go home, she called to the puppy. The puppy wagged its tail when it saw her. Go home, she called again. But the puppy just kept wagging. The old woman noticed that it still looked a little hungry, so she went to her refrigerator. She gave the puppy a hunk of cheese and 2 biscuits. Then she told it to go home. And the puppy went away. That night, as the old woman plumped up the pillows on Roxanne, she thought about the puppy. It was a very nice puppy, she thought. It was a very pretty puppy, she thought. But it couldn't stay. If it stayed, she would have to give it a name, and it could never last as long as Franklin or Fred or Betsy or Roxanne. She might outlive it, and she didn't want to risk that. She didn't want to outlive any more friends. She would just keep telling it to go home. Okay. I do want to pause right here. Your next piece on your worksheet for this book is a prediction piece. Okay, so based on what we have heard and what I've read, what do you think will happen next in the story? Go ahead and pause the video here so you can write on your lines what you think will happen next. Every day the shy brown puppy came to the old woman's gate. Every day she fed it and told it to go home. Always it went away, and always it came back the next day. This went on for many months. The puppy got bigger and bigger until soon it wasn't a puppy anymore. It was a dog. And it was still a dog with no name. Okay, that's where we're going to stop for today. Make sure that if you don't have all of your questions answered, you can always replay this video and listen for those answers so that you can make sure that you're understanding what we're reading. I will continue with the rest of our story tomorrow. We'll talk about more connections that I'll have. And then to finish out our book, we'll talk about theme for this one too, so we can make sure that we master that skill. All right, see you guys later.